This is Big Podcast.
It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I'm David Hooper. This is the podcast about growing your podcast. It is about building a big audience. It is about spreading your message. It is about making money with your podcast. BigPodcast.com is the website. This episode, it's the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. That's called Big Podcast Insider. The specific URL for that, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Everything that I'm talking about, it is linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You can go there for more and subscribe to the email edition. That comes out every Friday morning, New York time. On this episode, Live Fast, Die Fast, an SEO trick for podcasters, singer versus podcast host, how to find, develop, and vet news sources and guests, 30 podcast episodes in 30 days. Is producing a podcast worth it? Also some classified ads, things that I think will help you grow your podcast, build a big audience, the things that this podcast is about. This episode of Build a Big Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.fm, the leading platform to record studio quality remote podcast and video. It's used by over 70,000 people and companies. How does it work? It records locally on each participant's computer, then uploads those files to the cloud. That means you get the highest quality sound and video for each person speaking, regardless of that person's online connection. They've got an iOS app, meaning it works on Apple iPhone. You can invite, record, download high-quality audio and video via an iPhone. It makes it very easy to get great guest interviews. I want you to check it out. You can do it for free. Take a look, see how it works for you. They're going to give you a couple of hours. That's going to get you at least one interview, maybe two. Go to riverside.fm, sign up for a free account if you want to stick around, and you want to. Because audio quality matters, and people are judging your podcast by the quality of your audio. This is the easiest way to get more listeners for your podcast. Do the same thing that you're doing now, but do it at a higher quality audio. Riverside.fm will handle all of that for you. Again, you can try it for free. Riverside.fm, that's where to go. Sign up for the free account. Here's the discount code to get 15% off when you want to become a paid member. Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Get that free account at riverside.fm if you want to stick around and get 15% off. The discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. As I mentioned, this is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter called Big Podcast Insider. If you want to follow along, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Everything that I talk about here, it is about podcasting. So it gets a little confusing when I go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. In between those things, you will hear this sound. XERB. When you hear that, it's time to go to the next article. Let's check it out. XERB. Live Fast, Die Fast. A couple of months ago, a new social network started to gain momentum. With so much chaos in the world of social media and just the world in general, people were very excited about a kinder, safer public square. This week, that network is shutting down. Community, I'm going to put that in quotes, it is volatile. Doesn't matter if that community is online, maybe it's in the neighborhood that you live in, a hot nightclub, an active church, a popular restaurant. One day you've got something, the next day you've got nothing. One person leaves, other people follow, and the momentum builds from there. This can happen with your podcast audience. And here's a secret if you want to keep listeners engaged. It is good to change up what you're doing. Nobody wants to listen to the same episode over and over again. Probably the best example of this, and this is literally the same episode over and over and over again. This happened about 10 years ago. There was a trend where a host would ask the same 10 or 12 questions every single episode. How did you get started? Give me a success quote. Tell me about a time when you had no hope. If you had to start over again right now, what would you do? Questions like that. And there are different variations of this. Some of these podcasts, maybe they're about relationships. Tell me about meeting your wife. Tell me about your divorce. The same thing over and over again. And that's great when it comes to production. That is great when it comes to being a guest. You know what you're getting into, literally. I mean, there is no variation on these episodes. But the problem is for listeners, it's boring. It's boring. And that is why you do not hear of this format very much. Even when this format worked, because it was the same question every time, you could crank out episodes like crazy. You could do 5, 10 a day. Not a problem. In fact, you really didn't even have to host it. All you had to do is send a list of questions to the guest, say, record these answers, send them to me, have a technician, a virtual assistant, engineer, whatever you want to call them, pop those answers behind your pre-recorded question. This is not an exaggeration. I could email 1,000 people, have however many of those people answer those questions back with a recorded message. Got 1,000 episodes. Easy. But is it good for the audience? Does it keep an audience? No. It was more of a novelty than anything. Oh man, this guy's doing 5 episodes a day. Well, yeah. Is he? Or is it a virtual assistant popping those things together? It is risky to change things. It is risky for you because you know what you're getting into now, doing what you're doing. It is also risky for your listeners because your listeners may not like the change. Think about any time something changes on a social media network. They changed Twitter to X. Oh my God. Change it back. We still call it Twitter, by the way. Those that are left on that social network. Facebook changes their thread. Google changes an algorithm. People resist change. So what do you do as a podcaster? One good option is for you to test changes that you want to make to your podcast before you go live with them. And right now, today, this week, this month, it is a great time for you to test some of these changes. It's called NaPodPoMo. The official name, National Podcast Post Month. It was a variation of National Novel Writing Month, National No-Ro, Write-Ro, Mo, something. That was a trend too. NaPodPoMo. Let's just call it that. I've got more information coming up later in this episode. This is a great opportunity for you to test some things for you and also test some things for your audience before they go live. Also coming this month, right now, available. Go on your web browser and type this in, daily.bigpodcast.com. It's a daily newsletter for podcasters. It's short. It's to the point. Every day, 5 days a week. Monday through Friday, you will be getting some advice on how to grow your podcast audience, be a better host, attract more listeners, clarify your message, make more money with your podcast, attract sponsors. It's good info. And that's available at daily.bigpodcast.com. You thought I was going to say newsletter.bigpodcast.com, didn't you? No. That's the weekly newsletter. That's still going on. And if you want that, that is there, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. But the daily one, the brand new one, the one that just started this week, daily.bigpodcast.com. An SEO trick for podcasters. This costs just $25. Wordnik. It's the world's biggest online English dictionary, by number of words, that is. One of the words is podcasting. I bought it. So you go to Wordnik and you look at podcasting, it will say, this word brought to you by Big Podcast. Grammar Girl. Do you know that podcast, Grammar Girl? Check it out. It is very, very good for anybody who writes. It's all about the history of words. It's about communication. You're going to get a lot out of it as a podcaster. Grammar Girl, she turned me on to this. She bought the word podcast. She beat me to it. Zeta Christian, the world's oldest podcaster, she's been doing this for years. Didn't start till she was 69 years old. You too old to podcast? No. Not unless you're older than Zeta, then you're too old. Anyway, Zeta Christian, the world's oldest podcaster, she's got a podcast called My Spouse Has Dementia. She bought the word caregiver. Brad Shreve, he's got a podcast called Queer We Are. He purchased queer. And just as a side note, I know that word for some people has connotations that maybe are not positive. When I was a kid, it was an insult. But since we're on the topic of words, this is a great example of this. The meaning of words can change. And Brad, a gay man, the host of Queer We Are, he's owning that word. He's making it something positive. We all have the opportunity to do something like that. Not necessarily a word, but owning a specific identity. Make it positive, man. If you want the links to all these, they're at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Here's the trick. It's $25 a year. You get a nice high-value link to your site. Beyond that, you've got a great press opportunity. How does that work? You announce that you own the word. David owns podcasting. Grammar Girl owns podcasts. Zeta Christian owns caregiver. Brad Shreve owns queer. Press release worthy. Is anybody going to pick it up? I don't know. Try it. $25 a year to get a link to your site. Not a bad deal. If you jump in on this, by the way, let me know. Let me know on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads, wherever you are. I've got the links to Wordnik, all the people that I'm mentioning, and this deal at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Singer versus podcast host. The best podcast and radio hosts that I know, as far as voice, as far as delivery, they are also singers. My theory on this, and I went to college for music, so I'm pretty well versed in music. Great singers do two things. One, They listen. Because you got to harmonize. If you got a band behind you, you've got to stay in time with the band. They breathe. They know how to breathe, man. They know how to control their voices. And great hosts have to do those same things. Valerie Day, she's a friend of mine from a band called New Shoes. You know the song. But baby, I can't wait. You know that one? Yeah, you do. Snoop Dogg just sampled it. Everybody and his brother sampling it. It's like hundreds and hundreds of samples for that song. Anyway, she's got a free online course that as a host, you're going to get a lot out of. It is about singing, but also what you do with your voice. There's no catch. I know, right? With so many lead magnets, people are like, oh no, there's got to be a catch. And it's hard to believe, but no. Like I said, hundreds of people have sampled this woman. Everybody and its brothers heard this song. It's in the clubs, literally in the clubs right now, because somebody sampled it. It's going to be in an elevator, a hotel lobby, a Whole Foods. I mean, she's getting airplay like crazy. She's not doing this for money. She's doing this to help people like you, to help musicians, the people that she used to be. Let me tell you what she says about it in her words. She says, I created becoming a singer as a legacy project, a way to give back to the music community that's given me so much. When I was first starting out in music, I would have loved to have taken a course like this, but I would never have been able to afford it. I want the information and experience that I've gathered over a lifetime to be available to anyone who needs it. It's a free course. You got nothing to lose. And it's going to make you a better host if you do the work in it. So go check it out. Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. How to find, develop, and vet news sources. And also guests. This works for guests. This is an article from NPR about how to get people to talk to you. I've worked on various radio and podcasting projects over the years, and depending on the subject, I've had guests line up to talk to me, or just the opposite of that. I've really had to work hard to get some guests to talk to me. And not only that, then they have to agree to be taped, published. Some people are nervous about this. And if you haven't run into that, you're going to if you podcast long enough. This is a great article about how to work around that. Let me give you an example of this. I did an interview with a woman. She was running an Airbnb. The people who rented it turned it into a brothel while she was upstairs. She was a little nervous about retaliation. You can understand that. I heard the story through a mutual friend. I approached her. She said, I don't know. So we worked around that. Did it in a way where she felt safe telling me the story. It's a good story. But it wasn't going to give away her identity. Another thing this article talks about that I think is going to help you. There are times when you're on a very tight deadline and you need something now. I've had this happen. Maybe I rented a recorder. I've got it for a week, 10 days, 5 days, how long I've got it for. I've got the equipment. I'm ready to go. People say, oh man, can we do it next week? No. I got the equipment now. Or there's a quick turnaround. They want to get this thing on the air on Monday. I got to get it now because I got to start editing it. If it's not going to work for me, I've got to find somebody else who is going to work for me. So what do you do about tight deadlines? Well, there's tips here for you, man. Go get the article. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. 30 podcast episodes in 30 days. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you want to challenge yourself this month, NaPodPoMo is a great way to do that. You can test new podcast ideas, new segments. You can improve your hosting. How? Repetition, man. Keep showing up. 30 podcast episodes in 30 days. You make a new episode each day. You're not going to see it happening because it's slow. But at the end of day 30, you're going to be better. You're going to listen to day 1 and go, man, that sucked. I'm so much better than I was. Yeah. That's how it works. We're going to accelerate this thing, man. You got a podcast a week? Okay. That's over 6 months of podcasting experience that you're going to get in 1 month. And you don't have to do the same podcast. What you do with NaPodPoMo, it does not have to be fancy. Maybe it's just you getting behind the mic. Maybe it's you working on hosting skills, vocal inflection, lack of filler words. You work on whatever you need to. This podcast, the one you're listening to, Build a Big Podcast, it started out as part of NaPodPoMo. I was in podcasting. I was in radio. I had no plans on doing a podcast about podcasting, but I needed a topic for NaPodPoMo. It went well. Kept doing it. Is it too much at times? Yes. Yeah, it can be. I've completed NaPodPoMo 3 times. My advice for you is to keep things simple. Yes, you want to get better. Yes, better happens in steps. Yes, you can accelerate these steps with NaPodPoMo 30 episodes in 30 days. But if you stop in the middle, if you get burnt out, if you put it away and don't pick it back up again, You're not going to get better. Slow and steady is a much better plan than not podcasting at all. Why not jump in and see if it works out for you? If it doesn't, just stop, man. I recommend this to people every year. I know dozens, maybe hundreds of people that have gone through it. Every single person I know that has done it is better because of it. 30 days from now, you could be a better podcaster than you are now. Interested? Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. XERB. Is producing a podcast worth it? How many times have you asked yourself that? Probably a lot. Maybe every episode. I've got an interesting take on podcasting by Josh Spector. He runs a popular newsletter for online creatives. Here's the basic numbers for his podcast. He launched a podcast 14 months ago. It's produced 64 episodes since then. His podcast, I wouldn't call it highly produced. It's more or less a Zoom chat. Feels like it's edited on the script, but we're going to call it a podcast. It does go out via podcasting, and it also goes out via YouTube. He says this: the podcast has not seen significant growth. It's got an average of 587 downloads per episode. However, I mentioned YouTube. He's found success on YouTube. The videos from the interviews that he's got up, 128,789 views. And the channel, 2,900 subscribers. Let's talk about how the money works. The podcast has earned him $27,699 indirectly through book sales and consulting services. So let's get back to the question. Is producing a podcast worth it? There are some things about podcasting that are hard to quantify. For example, a podcast is a great delivery mechanism for you and your message, which is far more portable than other common online media options, such as YouTube, such as email. Me personally, I listen to podcasts in the car. If I'm cooking, podcast. Working out, podcast. Podcast is going to go with me wherever I go. It's going with you wherever you go. It's going with your listeners wherever they go. It seems everybody loves YouTube. Oh, it's a great discovery platform. Podcast has no discovery. Okay, let's give it that. There are some things that are great about YouTube. But when it comes to relationship building, who is spending more time with the people that you're trying to connect with? Is it a podcaster or is it a YouTuber? It's probably a podcaster. Yes, there are people who can't seem to get their head out of their phones watching video. But most of us, especially those of a certain age, over 30, we've got lives. We've got things that we like to do. Podcasts go with us. You can put it up on YouTube, by all means, do it. But for most people, the video adds nothing. In fact, it might take away from your podcast. It might take away from your reputation, that theater of the mind. Imagine where I am right now. I call it a tricked out walk-in closet. What does it look like? Maybe it's cooler than you thought. Or maybe it's just got a bunch of clothes in it. Now, I did say tricked out. It does not have clothes in it. But it's got moving blankets. It's got these huge panels that for, 5x7 room. I probably got enough sound panels in here for a room 5 times this size. It's got foam. It's got the computers, RE20 mic on a boom, a rack with effects that light up, look cool. You know, it's not bad, but it looks like everybody else's studio. That's not making me stand out. What makes you stand out is when you're in your listener's ear and that listener's got theater of the mind. What is it like to be in that studio? Where is he recording? Most people listening to this are probably too young, but look up Wolfman Jack if you're not familiar with that story. All right, everybody. Old school radio DJ from the 50s, 60s, 70s. Finally showed up on TV in the 70s, Midnight Special. And he talked just like that. All right, Wolfman Jack coming at you. Like that. And people are like, man, who's this guy? Had a border blaster. It was a radio tower right on the border of Mexico. 1 million watts. Special antennas that directed the signal to the United States. And you hear that voice coming through the airwaves. All right, everybody. You didn't know where he was. Turned out he was actually in the United States and they did it through the phone lines. But, you didn't know. And that's my point. When you're a voice coming through a podcast, you don't know. You don't know. When people hear your voice coming through your podcast, they do not know where you are. So make it seem bigger. Put in a little mystery. We are an overexposed culture. Yeah. I get it. YouTube's a discovery platform. But if you really work the audio thing and you have relationships with your audience, People are going to tell people you will grow your podcast. It is a long-term strategy. Are you going to go viral? No, you're not. But the truth about virality, it's not all it's cracked up to be. If you're not ready for it, it's not going to do a thing for you. It's like being a one-hit wonder. If you don't have their songs to back it up, if you don't have the talent to go out and tour, if you don't have an album in distribution, who cares? Doesn't matter. That song hits, then it disappears before you can do anything about it. You've got to have the talent to back it up. You've got to have the relationships to back it up. What happened to Chewbacca Mom? How's she doing now? The Island Boys. These guys had big opportunities, weren't ready for them. And then maybe you got to come back. But usually not. So what happens? These guys end up chasing that dream, man. Chasing that hit. You think heroin's addicting? Try fame. Not happening, man. Not usually. Because most people are trying to do the same thing that got them there, which you can't control. We can't control the viral stuff. People will say that you can, but if we could, we'd be doing it all the time. No. I mean, some people are skilled at it, but there is a lot of luck, man. And there's algorithms and things that are way out of our control. And me, I'm picking the slow and steady. I want to be doing this for a long, long time. I don't live and die by the algorithm. That's exhausting. You know that show, The Bachelor? I know 3 of them. They're a dime a dozen. I know people have done a lot of reality television. And it ain't bad, man. I mean, it's a good gig. I got an interview coming up with John Brennan. He was the cowboy, season 2 of The Real World. He calls himself the 7th reality star ever. And it's true. He was one of the very first reality stars. And he was big, man. He was the biggest guy on The Real World season 2. And that's when The Real World mattered, before everybody and his brother had a reality show. He's had a 30-year career off that. It can be done, but it's a mixed blessing, man. We're going to talk all about that. He's got a new podcast out, a new podcast network. He's got a hit song, but it's not all sunshine and roses. If you're interested in that, subscribe to the podcast, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That's how you do it. To wrap this up in a nice little bow, slow and steady. That's what's going to get you there. John, he's been working steadily for 30 years. Some of the people on season 2, people who had just as much opportunity as he did, same airtime, everything equal, they've disappeared. You've got opportunities if you take advantage of them. The number one way for you to do that, show up. More information, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. XERB. Classified ads for you. These are things that I think will help you to grow your podcast, spread your message, be a better podcaster. Swell AI automates writing podcast summaries, articles, social posts, and more. You can manage multiple shows in one dashboard, build custom templates for each show, automate everything via connections with Google Drive, Dropbox, and Zoom. It writes your episode notes for you. How easy is that? Are they perfect? No. You're going to have to edit them a little bit, but they're pretty good. It's a cool party trick. Go check it out for free. I've got it linked, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Speaking of ads on Build a Big Podcast, I am booking for 2024, the upcoming year. You can get your ad in the newsletter and on this podcast for as little as $35. $35! I believe in podcasting. I believe in independent business. I'm like Valerie Day with her singing course. I want to spread the wealth, man. If you're an independent podcaster, have an independent company, I want to help you spread the word about it to podcasters. Go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com. There's more information there. I'm booking for 2024, and I would love to showcase you here on Build a Big Podcast. Just one more thing. I'm like Columbo. If you want to work with me personally, this is something else I'm setting up for 2024. I've got something called Big Podcast AMP, AMP. It stands for Audio Monetization Program. It is a personal coaching program. I'm going to get you and other podcasters in together to work on your podcast, bring more people to your message, spread your message, make more money with your podcast. I know personal help sounds expensive, but it is very reasonably priced. And this is how to get more information. Bigpodcast.com/AMP, AMP, Audio Monetization Program. Bigpodcast.com/AMP. Thank you for listening to Build a Big Podcast. You want to hear that episode from John Brennan from MTV's Real World coming up about the realities of MTV, fame, and his new podcast. Also, an episode about how to sound better on your podcast from Dan Hughley of Focusrite. I've got both those coming up and some other great episodes. You will never miss them if you subscribe. And here's how to do that. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've got 3 buttons for you. If you're on an iPhone, button. Android, button. RSS feed. Button. I've got a QR code that you can scan. Pick the button that you want. Click on it. You will be subscribed to Build a Big Podcast. It is free. Stay as long as you want. Leave at any time. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Thank you for listening to Build a Big Podcast. I will see you on the next episode, but only if you subscribe. That's the only way we can guarantee this. So go there now before you forget, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I'll see you soon.